Hey 678ers, welcome back to the last week of this Now What series that we've been in. Now, we're in this series because what we've said in the last few weeks is that sometimes in our faith we get stuck in these places where we honestly don't know what to do. And we can find ourselves asking the question, now what? 2 weeks ago, we answered the now what question of what do we do once we decide to put faith in Jesus? And we said, well, the answer to that is to get baptized. And then last week, the now what question was, man, what do we do when we feel stuck and far away from God? Well, what we need to do is learn about God and continue to learn things from God and from His Word. Well, today we're going to talk about another now what situation that we find ourselves in sometimes. But before we get there, I have a question for you. Are you the type of person, when you find something super awesome, do you run and tell everyone about it, or do you keep it to yourself? Like that Netflix show that you just binged all 7 series of, or that video game that you cannot stop playing. Do you tell people about it? I don't know about you, but I love to tell people the awesome things that I found and the awesome things that I've done. If I scored the game-winning point for my team, I'm going to tell you about it. If I eat at a good restaurant, I'm going to tell you about it. If I find a great show on Netflix, if I'm playing a super awesome video game, if I create a piece of art that wins awards, if I find $5 in my pocket, I will tell you about it. I can remember when I first started reading my favorite book series, Harry Potter. Man, I would read it for hours and hours and hours, and then I would talk to anybody and everybody who would let me tell them about this incredible story. I can remember going to school and trying to figure out who has and hadn't read the series. And I remember talking to my friend Michael, and I had found out that he hadn't watched any of the movies and he hadn't read any of the books. And I told him, Michael, you have got to read this series. It's so good. And so I convinced him. I even gave him my first copy of The Sorcerer's Stone. It is the first book of the series. Well, then a couple weeks later, I checked in with Michael. Dude, how you liking the book? I know you probably think it's so awesome. Tell me how much you love it. And then Michael looked back at me and he said, Rothan, I gotta tell you something. I'm not actually allowed to read Harry Potter. My mom found the book. She put it through our mulcher and then sprinkled it in the flower beds out front. His mom completely destroyed my book. Well, as you can imagine, I was so upset and I was so frustrated. But that didn't keep me from telling other people about my favorite book series that I loved. I don't know what it is, but there's just something inside of us as people that wants to share awesome things with other people. So then, here's my question. If we truly believe that Jesus died and rose again, conquering death and providing for us a way to connect with God, if we truly believe that Jesus took away the penalty of sin and death, that now we have the ability to connect with God forever in heaven, and why don't we talk about that? Why don't we tell other people about it? In this series, we talked about the now what question for when we first become a believer. And we also talked about the now what question that we sometimes feel in our relationship with God when we feel kind of distant or stuck. But now we're answering that now what question of what we should do when we realize that there are people around us who don't know Jesus. You have friends, you have family members in your life, and they are separated from God. And you might know that, and you might be asking yourself the question, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Now what? Well, remember, when we have questions about life and about God and about really anything at all, we can find our answers in the Bible. Now, we've been looking at one verse the last few weeks, and it's actually Jesus talking to his disciples, giving them an answer for their now what moment. That verse is Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. And it says this, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Okay, so let's look at this verse. We see get baptized. We see teach people so they can learn more about me and the things that I've commanded them. But let's look at the first part of this verse. Jesus tells the disciples, go and make other disciples. How do they do that? By telling other people about Jesus. And listen to me, that command wasn't only for Jesus' disciples that day. That command is for every follower of Christ, including you. Jesus has commanded you to tell the people around you about him. And maybe now you're thinking, but how do I do that? Isn't it gonna be awkward? I don't even know where to start. But think about it. I mean, no one had to teach you how to tell all your friends about the show that you're binging on Netflix. No one had to instruct you how to tell everyone about that incredible play that you did in the sport that you play. You didn't have to take lessons on how to convince your friends to download the game that you can't stop playing. Why? Because it comes naturally to us as people to talk about the things that are important to us. Sure, it might feel awkward starting the conversation, but it's just like talking about anything else that you find super awesome or that you want your friends to know. And think about it. You having this conversation can help connect your friends to God who can save them. And you also get something out of the deal too. In fact, in the book of Philemon, verse 6, it says this, "And I pray that the sharing of your faith may become effective for the full knowledge of every good thing that is in us for the sake of Christ." Listen to that. I mean, the Bible actually tells us that when we are obedient to God to share our faith, we actually have a more complete understanding of all of the good things that we have in Jesus. We experience our faith in a more complete, more joyful way. So this week, I want you to start a conversation. And maybe that just looks like inviting someone to come to group or to come to church with you. Or maybe on Monday, it looks like telling someone that you went to church this weekend and asking them if they went to church. Telling someone what you believe or asking them what they believe. Somehow this week, start the conversation. Now, before we go into our groups and we talk about this, I want us all to do something. In fact, right now, I want you to bow your heads and I want you to close your eyes. See, what we're gonna do is we're gonna spend just a few moments in prayer right now, just us and God. And what I want you to do is I want you to say a short prayer to God in your own heart for boldness to start the conversation with one person this week. In fact, as you're having that conversation with God, I want you to tell God the name of that one person that you're going to start the conversation with. Go ahead and pray right now. Guys, remember, our faith, it's a journey. And sometimes, man, we feel like we are crushing it and life is awesome and we've got it all figured out. But there's a lot of times in this journey when we feel like we are stuck and we're asking ourselves the question, now what? When those moments come to you, I want you to remember Jesus's words. Man, we should be baptized. We should learn more things about God. We should continue to spend time with God, learning about Him and learning how we can better live for Him. And we should continue to tell other people about Jesus. I'm telling you, if we can hold on to those answers and make those big parts of our lives, I bet we'd ask ourselves, now what? A lot less. Okay? Go to your groups, have some good conversations. Remember, next week is all small group night, so if you don't know what you're doing yet, figure that out as a group right now, and then we'll see you guys as we kick off the next series soon.